Hey guys, I am back again. We are continuing Who Was Walt Disney, and we're starting with chapter 4, Drawings That Move. In Kansas City, Walt teamed up with another artist. He had a very unusual name, U.B. Iwerk. U.B. was shy and serious, but not at all like Walt. UB was also very talented. The two started their own company. They hoped to create art for ads and signs. They had plenty of ideas. They were missing only one thing: customers. The shop closed after only a month. Soon after, Walt and UB found jobs at the Kansas City Slide Company. It turns out to be a lucky break. The Slide Company changed Walt's life. He learned all about animation. Animation is a film of drawings that move. Cartoons. In 1920, cartoons were something new. Audiences were amazed to watch drawings of funny people and animals actually move on the screen. Here's a little bit about animation basics. An artist creates simple animation, for example, a dog wagging its tail, by drawing the same character over and over on separate pieces of paper. In each drawing, the position of the tail will be a little different. When the pieces of paper are flipped really fast, to the human eye, the tail appears to be moving. For films, professional animators create the illustrations of motion by recording the scene changes frame by frame. Artists competed with each other to invent new techniques for cartoons. Walt wanted to get in on the action, so he went to the library and took out a book called Animation Cartoons: How They Are Made, Their Origin and Development by Edwin G. Lutz. He studied the book and then he set up a studio in the shed behind his house. Every evening he drew cartoon characters in different positions and filmed them. It might take 18 drawings just to show a person raising an arm. Animation takes lots of time, but hard work never stopped Walt. He called his cartoons laughograms. They were silent, full of slapstick humor, and only lasted a couple of minutes. Some were based on fairy tales, but Walt could change the story a little to make it funnier. After selling a laughogram cartoon to the Newman Theaters in Kansas City, he started up a small company to make more. Walt recruited artists to help him make cartoons. After all, he couldn't do all the drawings himself. The problem was he couldn't afford to pay a steady salary. Instead, he promised to share any of the money earned from the cartoons. His friend U.B. Iwerk and a few other young men joined in his new business. They spent all day drawing characters, making up jokes, and goofing around with a movie camera. Walt worked on one film called Alice's Wonderland. It was about a real little girl named Alice, played by a 4-year-old actress named Virginia Davis. Walt's Alice finds herself in a cartoon world. Mixing live actions with animations was something new. But before he finished Alice's Wonderland, Walt's company went bankrupt. He even had to sell his movie camera. Kansas City was not the center of the entertainment business. Walt knew that. If he wanted to make it big, he'd better go where movies were made: Hollywood. Here's a little bit about making an animated Disney film. Walt Disney and his writers started plotting out a story scene by scene. Then, animators drew each character in thousands of different poses to create the action. Inkers traced the lines of each drawing on pieces of clear celluloid. Painters colored on the celluloid drawings. Other artists painted background scenes. After camera operators photographed each drawing on the right background, sound specialists recorded the voices and sound effects and added it to the background music. Once everything was done, there was still one more thing needed. Walt had to give the final approval. Chapter 5, Hollywood. After World War I, Hollywood became home to film studios such as Universal, Paramount, Warner Brothers, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, which is MGM. Movies were now a big business. In August of 1923, Walt packed a cardboard suitcase with his clothes and drawing materials. He bought a train ticket to California, where his older brother Roy was already living. Walt moved in with an uncle, paying a few dollars a month for room and board. Walt had big dreams for himself, but he certainly didn't look like much of a success. He was thick-skinned and wore shabby clothes. He spiffed himself up as best as he could and went to every movie studio in town. Somebody offered him a job. He had hoped, but it turned out nobody offered him a job. So he went back to his old idea of making and selling cartoons. In October, he finally got a break. A woman named Margaret Winkler saw and liked what Walt had done in Alice's Wonderland. She agreed to pay Walt for a series of Alice cartoons, which she would sell to theaters. This was terrific news, except for one thing. Walt had only 3 months to make a new film. His young actress, Virginia Davis, still lived in Kansas City. Also, Walt needed money to make the movie. He didn't even have a movie camera, much less a studio or artist to work with him. Walt turned to his brother Roy for help. Roy was 8 years older than Walt. Unlike Walt, Roy was practical. He had a good head for business, so the two formed the Disney Brothers studio. With a loan from his uncle and more money from their parents, Walt and Roy set up shop in a small office on Kingswell Avenue. Walt bought himself a movie camera, and he persuaded Virginia Davis and her family to move to Hollywood. At first, Walt did all the creative work in the studio. He thought up the story for each of the Alice movies. He directed his child star. He drew all the cartoon characters and put the live action and animation together. He worked so hard that his first film was finished ahead of schedule. But making a whole series of Alice films was too much work for one man. So Walt hired 3 men to operate the cameras and help with animation. He also hired 3 women to ink and paint the black and white cartoon drawings. One of the young women was small and pretty, with dark hair. She was named Lillian Bounds. Walt also worried that his own drawings were not good enough. He wanted his cartoon films to be the best in the business. So he got in touch with U.B. Erwin. Walt convinced U.B. to move to California and join the Disney studio. U.B. was talented and fast. He could produce great drawings in no time. Over the years, U.B. did more and more drawings while Walt focused on thinking up the stories and directing. Together, they created a new character named Oswald the Lucky Rabbit and started making a series of Oswald cartoons. It was a smart decision. Oswald was a hit. The studio began selling cartoons on a regular basis. Business was so good, in fact, that Walt and Roy moved to bigger offices on Hyperion Avenue, and Walt changed the name of the company. Instead of Disney Brothers Studios, he wanted to call it Walt Disney Studios. Did Roy mind? It seemed he didn't. All Roy said was, if that's the way you want it. It was okay with him. After all, Walt was the one making the cartoons. Walt was under a lot of pressure now. He had to make lots of Oswald cartoons and do it quickly. He became short-tempered and irritable. He took his worries out on his employees. Some quit because they couldn't stand his insulting remarks. Walt could make you feel real bad when he wanted to, one of them said. Then something really nasty happened. Something Walt never expected and didn't deserve. A man named Charlie Mitz, whose company was buying Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoon, hired away most of Walt's artists. Mitz decided he didn't need Walt anymore. With Walt's own artists, he could make and sell Oswald cartoons without Walt Disney Studios. What Charlie Mitz did wasn't actually against the law, but it was still wrong. Walt was so upset that he couldn't eat or sleep. Not only had he lost Oswald, But he had been double-crossed. The only way he could save this business was to create another cartoon character, an even better one than Oswald. Walt worked like mad on a new idea and kept it secret. Only a few people, UB, who did the drawings, and Roy, who was always loyal to his brother, and Lillian, who inked the drawings, knew about the new character. The new character was going to be a mouse. We're going to stop there for today. I know that's kind of a cliffhanger, but you might know where it's going if you know anything about Walt Disney. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.